Good afternoon. On behalf of Engineers Australia, I'm delighted to welcome you all to the AI Advantage Smarter Project Workflows for Engineers. My name is Megan Purdy and I'm the moderator for today's event. In keeping with our custom, Engineers Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of the countries throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, skies and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the oldest continuous cultures on Earth and our first engineers. We pay our respect to them and their cultures and to elders past and present. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that today's event is being hosted with Engineers Australia's industry partner, Bluebeam. Bluebeam is the leading provider of digital productivity and collaboration solutions for industries that design and build our world. Since 2002, Bluebeam has made desktop, mobile and cloud-based solutions for paperless workflows that improve project communication and streamline processes across the entire project lifecycle. Trusted by over 3 million users in more than 160 countries, Bluebeam solutions empower professionals to make their mark, adapt to change, and deliver projects successfully. Headquartered in Pasadena, California, Bluebeam has offices globally and is part of the Nemetschek Group. We thank Bluebeam for their continued support. Now today we'll hear from our three speakers followed by our live audience Q&A. So I encourage you, as always, to please send your questions through to our speakers via the chat box. I'd now like to take this opportunity to introduce our first speaker, Rachel Hicks, Digital Director, Aurecon. Rachel is a digital professional with over 20 years of hands-on experience across technology projects with a focus on project management, delivery optimization, and team leadership. In her role as digital director, Rachel enables Aurecon's award-winning team of developers, designers, and AI experts to produce quality, high-value applications for Aurecon clients and the domain experts in our design, advisory, and engineering teams. Through this, Rachel has led teams delivering digital and AI projects to government, energy, utility, mining, and transport clients, providing innovative approaches to drive productivity and boost engagement. Please welcome Rachel Hicks.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining today. My name's Rachel Hicks and I'm Digital Director with Aurecon. I could tell you a little more about my background, but a picture tells 1,000 words, hey? For anyone wondering, this complex, detailed, and highly personalized introduction to myself took Google Gemini around 30 seconds to generate. I loaded it a copy of my LinkedIn profile and a picture of me presenting at Ozwater, gave it the context, and here we are. I am a little disappointed looking at it, at the number of audience members who are looking at laptops and tablets instead of engaging with my presentation. And if I'm going to be super critical, it's also made a little bit of a mess of the Aurecon logo. I hope marketing aren't watching today. But still, it's pretty crazy and amazing, hey? Can you even imagine describing this a few years ago? Of course, this application of the technology is a bit of a party trick. And I'm going to be talking today about some of the ways that we're using AI at Aurecon to tackle more complex engineering problems. But first, one more party trick. Here's another story that Google Gemini helped me to illustrate. I promise this is the last of my AI image prompts, but I couldn't go past the opportunity of asking generative AI to give me a picture of its own birth announcement. But seriously, can you all believe this was just over 3 years ago? I remember at the time reading the articles, feeling a mix of curiosity, excitement, but also, to be fair, a healthy dose of skepticism with some of the wild promises and dire predictions I was reading about. So, 3 years later, what promises have been realised? What has changed about the way that we work? And what have we learnt along the way? As it happened, when we all started hearing about ChatGPT and generative AI, Aurecon had actually already been preparing for the moment without realizing we were doing so. Since around 2016, we'd been scaling up the data and analytics, computational design, and machine learning parts of our business, which were to form the foundation of our AI capability when those generative AI tools hit the market. Personally, I was leading a software development team across 4 squads who at the time were focused on building applications to complement our engineering work and offer innovative digital approaches to our clients. As soon as we started playing with ChatGPT and realized the opportunities of this technology, we pivoted the entire team, put everyone in AI and Python training, and focused on tools to make the most of the new generative AI technologies and the potential we could see in them. So Recall is the business application we created where it all started for us. So building on our foundations, we just established Recall around mid-2023, sort of as a platform and playground for early experimentation applying this technology. We started off with a number of small kind of handy tools within the platform, but our main work started to center around building and optimizing a tool that was intended to connect all of our company's knowledge and expertise accumulated over decades with a natural language model to allow us to be able to interact with and benefit from our decades of work and experience. So these tools quickly became really impactful in the business. You can see from the stats on the slide, we've had a huge number of users. Over 6,000 people in the business have gone and taken a look at this tool, but more importantly, 4,000 are coming in weekly as part of their work routine. Those of us on the technical side have always been excited with this technology, but the business became particularly excited when we started measuring and sharing the savings that team members were reporting through the efficiency that's possible with these tools. It saved the business over 31,000 hours since rolling out, and we feel like we're only scratching the surface of what's possible. So while we were getting excited experimenting with tools and throwing them at our engineers to see what provided efficiency gains, at the same time, we were convening a lot of discussions at the highest level of the business to ensure the right frameworks and governance were in place to use this kind of technology safely. Critical to us was ensuring data privacy, security, and sovereignty. It's about safeguarding personal data through a strong security model, and also ensuring generated data does not infringe upon the rights of the owners and the creators. Importantly, our tool is also set up as a stateless model. For those who don't know what that means, in a nutshell, Microsoft and ChatGPT aren't learning from the data or the behavior of our engineers. The benefits are in-house and the data is staying there too. Some of the key approaches that we use are only using infrastructure hosted in Australia, making sure that we're aligning to Essential 8 security standards, and we've also achieved and maintained accreditation in ISO 27001. For those of you who aren't experts on the ISO codes, that's the Information Security Management one. Lastly, and importantly, on ethics and governance, a big part of this is developing and adhering to ethical guidelines and establishing good governance frameworks. Approaches that I've seen and that we employ include forming governance steering committees, ensuring that they've got good senior level representation and also representation across different domains in the business, for example, from HR through to technology through to legal. People and policies made by this group should be signed off at the executive level. You can't delegate that responsibility. If you're experimenting with AI tools and technologies in your business, this is the sort of scaffolding that you should be enabling in your environment or asking of your vendors. These are incredibly powerful business enabling tools, but only if used securely, responsibly, and with good governance. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of this technology? What's living up to the promises, and where are the opportunities for improvement? The top 5 lessons that we've learned. Number 5, we've learned to take a proof of concept approach and trial things light and fast. Associated with this is the fact that we're not afraid to kill our own products if something better emerges. The next lesson we've learned is to not go it alone. We're having a lot of conversations and talking about a lot of collaborations across industry with everyone from the university sector to big players like Microsoft and AWA through to smaller startups that can differentiate our delivery, as well, of course, as our valued clients. We've also learned through experience that there's a lot to be gained from a broad industry-wide perspective on how to gain value from these tools. So in other words, not just looking at opportunities to apply this kind of technology in isolation. And the second lesson, it's no fun if it's easy. If that's got you intrigued, that's lucky, because I'm going to spend a little bit more time on lessons 2 and 3 because there's some really interesting stories to unpack there. So on the power of an industry-wide approach, you may recall I was talking about recall earlier. Almost a year ago, I found myself on stage doing a live demo of our Recall AI technology suite. I can tell you from that personal experience, there is nothing like a live demo of AI technology to get your pulse racing. And this was alongside the Australian Water Association's Head of International and Industry Programs, Dr. Nicola Nelson. So how did this collaboration and this frightening live technology share begin? As a technology group, we'd been considering how to make the technology behind Recall, which allowed everyone in the business to search our company info, a little bit more useful for everyone. One thing we love doing is empowering our engineers. So we had the idea of, imagine if everyone in the business was empowered to build their own Recall, their own customized AI-powered engine that could handle large volumes of information. We loved that idea so much that we went ahead and built it. So one of our water engineers started playing around with that technology and said, look, hey, if we wanted it to, could that handle 2,600 papers? We said, well, heck yeah, it can. So through applying that knowledge agent technology, they made their own AI tool and designed it to interrogate over 14 years worth of accumulated knowledge, learnings, and industry eminence from Ozwater, Australia's premier water industry event. After our Ozwater 2025 presentation of this technology, Nicola and I both received a bunch of feedback from people both who attended and had heard about the presentation, that people were really interested in what we'd shown and wanted a chance to get hands-on with this kind of technology. And we thought, well, why not? So AWA and Aurecon together ran a pilot to give limited access to interested people across a number of AWA members and Aurecon clients. Aside from the positive results, an interesting outcome has been the pilot giving one of the participant organisations the confidence and the information required to initiate their own AI proof of concept project starting in a few months. So for us, that really demonstrates the power of an industry-wide approach and partnering with organisations. And if you're watching and interested in doing this, please feel very welcome to reach out. We're always happy to chat about opportunities to collaborate. So on to our second lesson learnt, that complex problems are where the fun is. Like all good collaborations, our partnership with Electronet began with a conversation between a couple of engineers talking about some of the challenges and opportunities that Electronet were grappling with, where they discussed the possibility of using AI to help. It was, at the time, a technology that was getting a lot of hype, but which neither of them had seen in action yet. The outcome of that conversation was a 6-month proof of concept collaboration between Electronet and Aurecon, where we tested the idea that we could apply AI and automation technology to their connection inquiry response process to help them deliver these responses more quickly, with a goal to getting renewable projects online faster. Through that 6 months, we worked side by side with their engineering team, with our energy domain experts at Aurecon and also our digital and AI specialists, to map their workflows, apply and test the technology, and see what it could do. I'm going to pause there and ask, did you know, while the numbers vary, this montage speaks to a reality that's been discussed at length in industry, that business is currently observing a very high fail rate in conversion of AI proof of concepts to operational tools. Yes, you've guessed it, I've snuck in one more Google Gemini party trick, but the eagle-eyed amongst you are probably also wondering, what the heck is a dactyard of innovation? I wondered the same thing, so I asked Gemini, which was quick to self-own that it had stuffed up. But I did want to keep this in there and not correct it, as I think it illustrates an important lesson, that this technology is super fast, it can do amazing things, but it can will and does make mistakes. This is why designing to keep the human not just in the loop, but driving the loop is so important when you're applying this kind of technology, particularly in the engineering space. But where were we? Yes, the good news is our collaboration with Electronet will not be just another statistic. After the business case around the proof of concept demonstrated a strong investment case and successful application of the technology, it has progressed to be established as an operational tool. So why has this succeeded where others have failed? What was the difference? We think it was the co-development model. As I mentioned earlier, we kept both Electronet engineers and Aurecon energy specialists very close to the developers, making sure that they were inputting and correcting way before we even wrote a line of code, and with multiple checkpoints through design and our iterative build. And throughout, we kept the human driving the loop central to our design, with particular emphasis on making it easy to check AI-generated text and processes around those human checks to ensure that they stay central to the output and there's a digital record sitting alongside them. Because what we definitely don't want is any DAC-tards making their way into renewable energy connection project designs. Last but not least, the pedantic among you have probably been a bit bothered that I stopped at lesson 2. So here you are. The number one lesson that we, AWA and Electronet, learnt along the way is just start. There can be a bunch of reasons and justifications not to. For example, feeling like your data isn't ready. What if some magical out-of-the-box solution comes along in time? What if this whole AI thing is a fallacy and it's not really going to work all that well? With the right checks and balances in place for the DAC-tards, the reality is it does work. And if you don't start now, there's a serious risk of getting left behind and missing out on all the gains and opportunities that this sometimes crazy but often amazing technology can offer.
Thank you, Rachel, for your input. I'd now like to welcome our second speaker, Leander Starr, Global Accounts Manager, Bluebeam. Leander is a results-driven account manager with over a decade of experience selling SaaS solutions to across the construction technology landscape. With a proven track record at industry leaders including Autodesk, Procore, and Bluebeam, Leander has helped some of the largest contractors, consultants, and owners in Australia streamline operations, improve collaboration, and drive digital transformation. Please join me in welcoming Leander Starr.
Okay, so for today, we're going to talk about 3 different things. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the role of AI in design and construction. Secondly, I'm going to talk a little bit about how Bluebeam is approaching AI. And then lastly, I'm going to pass to my colleague Shanik, who's going to talk about some of the workflows and challenges that Bluebeam is going to solve for when we look at our AI approach and some of our new AI products. Before I go into the role of design and construction, I want to take a step back and talk about how do we view AI as individuals. So whenever I speak to anyone about AI, typically we find that people fit in 3 categories. So first category is you're nervous about AI, you're unsure of its future, and you're scared that it's going to take your job. Second category is you're super excited about AI, you're ready to embrace it, and you've already started to invest in your own education and tools when it comes to technology. And lastly, just for a bit of fun, you're not really sure about AI, but what you've done is just create random images generated through ChatGPT that you send to your friends, like King Charles Cavaliers riding dragons on construction sites. Regardless of the way that you view AI, the truth is it's actually coming to our industry. And how do we know that? Well, we look at the funding and the amount of money that's being pushed into our industry through construction technology. So if we take a look at some of the numbers, in the first 3 quarters of 2025, there was $3.7 billion of construction tech funding in our industry. Out of the $3.7 billion, over 1/3, $1.36 billion, was specifically invested in robotics and AI. And what that really tells us as an industry is when investors come into the market, they expect a return, one. Secondly, when amounts of money like this come in, it means that the industry is moving away from hype and it's effectively moving to a mature approach where organizations need to deliver a return back to their investors. So if we look at the trends of AI, the first thing is just in January 2026 alone, there was $1.7 billion of funding in construction technology alone. And that is 176% growth year on year. So So that is really reiterating my point around moving from hype to mature platforms. If we look at number 2, there's been a rapid growth and attention on our industry. And what I mean by that is when we look at construction funding for the last 6-7 years, there was a significant amount of acquisitions and money being funded into our industry as we move from paper-based workflows to digital. The acquisition of PlanGrid, Oracle's acquisition of Aconex, Procore's IPO. There was a lot of hype about our industry, but that kind of died off with such things as COVID, and it was just an emergence and a slowdown of technology funding. But that's all changed with AI now. And if we look at some of the numbers, just in the end of 2025, there was $124 million put into construction tech startups specific to AI. So as an example, Permitflow, they received $54 billion in a Series B, and that reiterates the fact that AI organizations are being co-founded, and secondly, they're moving very fast. They're getting funded by larger AI investors. And lastly, something I really didn't think about in whatever happened in my lifetime, but if I think about robotics and autonomous vehicles, there is some organizations in the world, like Waymo, for example, that are doing driverless taxis. But the truth is, I didn't think that was going to come to our industry, but an organization called Bedrock Robotics took $270 million in funding to create operatorless heavy machinery. And the reason why they're doing this is because they're trying to solve a fundamental challenge in our business, which is labor shortage. And that labor shortage can be solved in a couple of ways, either bringing more people into our industry or creating what they're doing, autonomous vehicles that do not rely on people. And so organizations like NVIDIA have invested, and NVIDIA's AI investment arm have invested in our industry specific to help solve this challenge. So what does AI mean for our industry? When I speak to a lot of our customers, 3 typical trends pop up all the time. So the first one being model context protocol. So if anyone that doesn't know what MCP is, it's effectively the universal layer between the AI and your actual project and your technology. And so what I mean by that is, I can give you an example. So if you look at ChatGPT and Claude or Copilot, if you were to put in drawings into those and ask it about your project, there's no context. It won't be able to achieve much other than looking at the drawing by itself. MCP becomes that context. And what it does is it allows for universal connection between all different applications through building what we call a MCP server. So organizations who are much smaller in the industry that have, say, for example, 0 to 250 employees will become much more nimble because they won't have to build integrations between 2 different tools. What they'll be doing is connecting to 2 different MCP servers, and they'll be able to compete when it comes to nimbleness and technology with some of the larger players. The second thing that we're going to see around MCP is a much more connected ecosystem. So what we find now is some of the biggest challenges around data is data sitting in different silos. So at the moment, a lot of our customers are speaking to us and saying, well, if I put the information here, how is it going to move to the next stage and the next stage and connect to this system and connect to the next CDE? AI eradicates a lot of these issues. And the reason for that is because AI can read unstructured data, and MCP servers are going to allow individuals to use things like natural language and actually prompt information to be pushed from one silo to the next silo and break down those walls specifically. The second thing that a lot of our customers and things that I've been hearing in the industry is AI agents. So our industry in specific has a lot of manual tasks that need to be done on a daily basis to complete projects. And AI agents are going to be the catalyst of eradicating admin friction. And what I mean by that is, if we still go to site at the moment and we speak to a lot of our customers, there are still a lot of manual processes when it comes to paper, people inputting data, and people reviewing tasks manually. AI agents become that automated process. And the thing about AI agents is they don't take annual holidays, they just always work 24/7. The second challenge that AI agents are going to solve for our industry is change management. So we went through a significant change in our industry in the last 10 years, I would say, moving from paper-based workflows to digital. And Bluebeam has specifically been tasked with that, with helping customers move in that direction. But in saying that, there's been a lot of friction when it comes to change management around people's behaviors and understandings of technology. With AI agents, people are becoming much more familiar with things like prompting, natural language. Many people now have access to ChatGPT. It will eradicate and remove change management issues in our industry because people can just type prompts, the AI agent will go and do it, and it'll effectively execute on that task. And lastly, there's going to be a fundamental shift in the way that we look at AI. So when it comes to working on AI models and working with large language models at the moment, the biggest thing that we have is we're working on in the cloud. So effectively, if you were to go and write a prompt right now, you would go to ChatGPT or Copilot, but that still gets processed in the cloud. But if we look at our industry if we look at our industry right now, the biggest challenge that we have is we don't always use the cloud. A lot of our computers use Revit and AutoCAD, but those are still desktop applications. Bluebeam is a desktop application. So there is a term called computer use, where different AI providers like Claude and a new tool that's just been created called OpenClaw will work on your desktop and execute tasks as an AI agent, as if you were doing it yourself. So instead of you having to go to a chat window in the cloud, you would just do it on your computer alone. So we're going to see in the future, as AI models get trained specifically, we, in the next 6 months or a year, could be able to go to our Bluebeam application, type into a bar on our desktop and say, move all of these markups in Bluebeam to the next system. And the AI agent will go and do that for us using computer use. Lastly, one of the biggest topics that I always get mentioned to me is generative design. So our industry is one of the largest data collection industries in the world. And not just by size, but just by the sheer amount of information coming in between projects, organizations, and businesses have built generative intelligence and information over the last 10, 20, 30 years. A lot of that's going into a data lake. But what we're seeing is the emergence of taking a lot of that data and generating tools coming out of there. So we'll see a significant amount of interest in the next 2, 3 years where AI large language models are going to be able to look at your own data lake, look at your own systems and say, okay, we understand your company, we understand what's specific for your project, and we're going to be able to create elements from that. So it could be libraries in Revit, it could be icons and stamps in Bluebeam. Those will be generated from AI specific to your business. And lastly, we'll also see that when it comes to winning new jobs, we look at things like pre-visualization of models, creating cinematic-like videos to pitch for new tenders. In the past, that was a very manual process, and organizations had to work individually and say, we need to go and render X amount of frames to create this video and spend X amount of time to create a video to then put into a tender. We are seeing the emergence of cinematic like videos just being created through prompts. So as time progresses, and like I mentioned, where AI understands your business and understands your data, you'll be able to go in and say, create me a video of this project with this specific element and make it 30 seconds. And that will really bring a large amount of value back to your business in terms of time and effort spending on bidding for new projects and allowing yourself to stand out. How is Bluebeam approaching AI? Just before I go into Bluebeam's approach on AI, I just want to touch on a concept of local AI models versus hybrid AI models. So, like an example that I gave earlier, when we do chat to a Copilot or a ChatGPT, what typically happens is we make a prompt, that information gets sent to a data center, they process it, then it gets sent back to you via the cloud. Now, this way is very effective from a performance perspective, scalable and flexible. You pay a flat price, $30 a month, and then you chat to those models. The challenge with this is as AI organizations grow, they will have to change the way that they charge organizations when talking to AI models. And what I mean by that is, while right now the consumer gets charged $30 a month or $40 a month for that subscription, large enterprise organizations will actually get charged in tokens. And so every single prompt that you make will deduct a certain amount of tokens from your pool you purchase as an organization. So this becomes a little bit more expensive in the long run because every single interaction you're having with that AI is effectively charged. So the other way to interact with AI models is to download them to your desktop, which I'm not sure if a lot of people know, but you actually can download AI models to your desktop right now. So there's things and softwares like Olama and LM Studio, which are large repositories and chat windows where you can download models specifically onto your desktop and you can start interacting with them locally. They work offline. And while they're not as effective and have the same intelligence as a large language model on ChatGPT or Claude, they are still quite effective. And especially when it comes to doing very simple tasks like text generation, some image generation, these models work really, really well. And the best thing about it is they're cost effective because you own that model yourself, so you have to manage it. But when Bluebeam was taking the approach around how do we integrate our tools with AI, should we take a cloud-based approach or should we take a local approach? We actually blended the two together and we built a hybrid approach. So when we look at Bluebeam's approach to AI, like I mentioned before, we will still use the cloud instance of AI large language models. And so what will typically happen is when you're doing heavy compute resourced exercises or processes, we will send that information to the cloud. So Shanik is going to talk a little bit about some of those processes today, things like stitching drawings together. That will all be processed by the large language provider. But for smaller tasks, things that can be run on your desktop, Bluebeam will definitely run that locally, and it will just use your computer's resources. You will not be charged any additional tokens, but you'll still have that same functionality. For example, AI overlay and the ability to work offline, as well as leveraging your computer to reduce the amount of costs that you're going to have for your organization enterprise-wide. So in saying that, I'm going to pass to Shan. He's going to talk about some of the challenges that we solve using AI, as well as some of the workflows for our industry that Bluebeam is looking at. Thanks.
Thank you, Leander, for your input today. And now I have the pleasure of welcoming our third speaker, Shanik Halliday, Senior Customer Success Manager, Bluebeam. Shanik brings over 13 years of BIM experience to his work helping clients leverage technology to deliver better outcomes. Shanik has proudly cultivated a passion for problem solving that can be seen in his drive to use building technology to increase efficiency during construction and better ongoing facilities management by delivering improved, coordinated building designs. Please join me to welcome Shanik Halliday.
So first of all, thank you very much, Engineers Australia, for having me on again. I really appreciate the time and I hope you, as the audience, get a lot of good information and opportunities of how you can use our software. And I try and give some more real life, opportunities of how you can use it. I also want to thank Rachel for her input. I definitely appreciate what people are doing, out in the coalface as such, and how it's more relative to than just the software companies. And obviously, Leander, give me the intro into how we're using Bluebeam or AI, and now I'm going to give you a bit more of a perspective of where we are going now with Bluebeam. To start us off, though, I thought it'd be important to really talk about where Bluebeam has come from, and not too much of a historical story, but really to point out something that is quite relative to AI. So what I mean by that is originally our big transition for the industry was moving from a paper process into a digital process. And you can see from that, we're not really here to eliminate people. We just want to make them more efficient in what they do, which you can, we obviously understand now what that means from a paper to digital. Well, the way I see it is that's what AI is doing next. We're here to improve the productivity of what people do, not necessarily, replace people as such. So today I'm going to give you some examples of what they are and, where we're taking Bluebeam and hopefully give some interest into that. So first of all, I just want to say there's an entry level into AI, and that's computer image recognition. And so with that, if you've been using Bluebeam since, I think, 21.2, you may have already used our auto align tool. So going back a step and thinking of what we've done previously, you've got two different drawings, you understand the different revisions. Well, way back in 19 and 20, you'd have to pick 3 points on each drawing, and then hopefully you can understand what I mean here. You have to line them up. And this is saving clients a lot of time because it's really easy to recognize the changes between the different revisions, whether you're about to send them out or you're receiving them. Well, with AI and auto align, it automatically does this, as the name suggests, and that's just more efficiency. So we're just building that efficiency into it. So what you see now into this tool here in stitching is we're incorporate this after customer feedback into our infrastructure projects or our clients' infrastructure projects. So in this example here, what you can see is we've got an infrastructure project and we're using the computer image recognition to say, well, look, this is the area you want to allot and we want you to actually stitch it together. Now, I understand if you've got access to the authoring software, well, you can just do a long plot. In fact, I used to do that when I was drafting on the level crossing removals in Melbourne. And that's all great and easy, but the reality is I still go and see clients in engineering companies that are stitching this together. They don't always have access to the authoring software. We're not always sharing this with the builders as well. So this creates an opportunity, because the reality is you want to get the understanding of the entire scope of the project, and the repeatable information, and understanding where it all goes. So let's take it up a notch. Let's look into MCP. So as Leander would have mentioned, this is Machine Context Protocol. So what we're doing is we're bringing the AI into Review Desktop. So for us, we're using Claude, and in the future, we see more opportunities with other softwares bringing desktop opportunities inside this. So thinking about this, one of the most powerful things I think about, and where I'm excited about where AI can go within Bluebeam, this is that as we add new features to Bluebeam, like we've got these magic markups coming through, we've got some other new function and offset and so forth. Like, these are all really cool, but the reality is it's just one more tool at a time. AI changes and puts the next layer on top of this. I'm just trying to work out how I could communicate. I'm thinking with the clients, it's like all encompassing, but I just want to look through a lens of AI. So what I'm saying here is, in the past, we've had people, contact us and they say they want to do new buttons within Bluebeam, or can they do some coding? And that's even tricky. We've got scripting options. You can go into JavaScript, but honestly, that's not accessible for everybody. The reality of what we can do now with natural language is we could just type it, and because the AI has connectivity into the actual functions within Bluebeam, I can use natural language that in the back end, Bluebeam is going through the entire processes as if it was an API. So then all of a sudden, we've got several things that can make a process, and this is where the real-time savings. So let's have a look inside some of the functions that we're doing and some examples that we have today. So let's have a look into like a real-world example. Well, in this example, at least, we've got review connected to AI via MCP. So the principle of what we're doing here is we've asked through natural language to find a particular object and isolate them, identify them, and then change the properties in some format. And honestly, that's pretty simple. But let's look at the principle of it and take it further. You see, we get the opportunity when you think about those infrastructure projects. We're looking at pink room markups or maybe interdisciplinary reviews. And there might be a particular packages that are going out into studio sessions. Those packages will have a particular status process that has to be adhered by. So there's potentially, many drawings, maybe hundreds of drawings, and maybe hundreds and hundreds of comments. And they all have to be closed out in accordance with these best practices, or what their mandate is. So theoretically, that should be checked by a person from a QA point of view to ensure that it's been adhered to. What we've done is we've actually, on our own example pieces in-house, we've taught the AI what that process is, even variations to that process which are acceptable, then ask for it to check through a package that's gone through a studio session and see if all those comments are being closed out appropriately. Now, as you can see, it's quite convoluted and it's quite time-consuming, but this was quite easy for the AI to identify those ones that weren't closed out properly, and then we can actually isolate them, whether it be in a report, and then contact those people to close out accordingly. So I think this has a really quite powerful message moving forward and how we can be using the software. Okay, so now let's take this a little bit further. So MCP for QA/QC. So in this example, in running the background, it's been set up from one of our clients on an example piece of ISO standard 7200. This is title block reviewing. And I actually do get inquiries from time to time. They want, maybe it might be a government body, they're receiving the drawings, or maybe someone about to issue some drawings. And they want to know that all the title block information has been filled out in accordance to regulations. So again, this is a tedious process. It's a way you could do it within Bluebeam now, but it's not great and it's time consuming. People might even just check it manually. So what we're looking at here and what's been set up is project instructions. See, the thing is, as you would have experienced, and I still do, that when I go into my AI, whether it be Perplexity or ChatGPT or whatever you're using, even Claude for that matter, people are going to write their own prompts. Now, the issue with different prompts is I might write one prompt and Leander writes a very similar prompt, but not the same wording. We may get some different outcomes. So how can we think from a drafting practice or office standardization? That's where we can go into projects within Claude. So now think about the people that maybe are programmers, looking at best practices. They can write these particular prompts that we can share throughout the domain, and then they've got best practices in play. Another thing to add is when I get my prompts, I kind of get sick of writing the extent of the prompt, where you can write quite a long-winded prompt. Those prompts can reference other material internally or externally as well. It gets really quite powerful. I did a prompt the other day that's referencing some tags information for P and ID. So you can see where this could really go and then be standardized throughout the company. So in this next one, so as part of Max, we've got the opportunity to connect sessions. This is the unicorn that I was looking for when I was drafting in Revit many years ago, but well, it's only coming out today. So let's have a look inside this. So what you see on the screen here, so it's not AI, this is an integration we've built out. So what's happened here is a PDF that's been marked up in a studio session. That session information is being brought into Revit. And you can see there on the left-hand side on the browser that the information from the studio is coming through, like statuses information. So this is coming a live coordination. Now, what's important too is that information is turning up on the appropriate 2D space or in the drawing space. But also, if you want to understand the relationship where it is in the model, it's going to show through there as well. So part of my job is really trying to help clients unlock just not one individual function, but a set of processes that we can stitch together maybe. So to that, what I would suggest is an opportunity as people work from home or remote or maybe resource centers, that someone could be drafting within Revit. They can print up the drawings and then publish them to the studio session. Before they do that, they can use MCP. So they can coordinate the information that's required to go into there. So it might be metadata, say, around statuses that gets used for their company's policy or closing out their comments. So now that's all set up for the studio session. They invite everyone else, as they normally would, to the session, collaborators from all around the world or inter-office, whatever you need. They run the studio session. They invite other people with Revit to also do those markups. And at the end of this, they can close the session. Now there's new APIs within Bluebeam that you can access information from the studio session, pull it down, but maybe they can't get access to that because that's a bit of a coding element, right? So with MCP, there's an opportunity to run with natural language, run the prompt to pull the information down into a format that can again go into other software downstream. So, well, they also could be file types like other PDFs. It could also be into Power BI. So we're seeing this starting to happen with our clients. And as much as it's a little bit more cumbersome at the moment until the APIs are being used or MCP comes out and becomes accessible. But what I want to present to you is the opportunity that this could be a Power BI studio session report on all the markups, what's been done, how many drawings are in there, and what's being completed. This could be a package, this could be a project, this could be an office set of projects, or this could be the entire company. Because of Power BI and the information we have inside there, it gets quite powerful. Ultimately, what I see here is just what we can do with the AI and pulling the data out. So what's next? Where are we going? So the next part that I want to leave you with is where we're going next. So part of the acquisitions mid last year was with Firmus, and let's have a look inside there and what it can do. So inside Firmus, I think of my time when I was drafting, and so I'm issuing a drawing package. Now that drawing package has to relate to the specifications that we've set out, or maybe cross-reference some information from the architects. We have to adhere to Australian design standards, and possibly the digital execution plan might come into play potentially. Now, relating all this information and back to the drawings and make sure it's all coordinated and understood is quite tricky and complex. well, what if we can just get AI to understand these different complexities or offer standards that's required? So this gets quite powerful when you're about to issue drawings, that you're trying to catch those issues before they actually come out. Equally, we see this is a great opportunity for people receiving those drawings. They can look for problems and errors before they actually go to price a project into tender, or worse still, into the construction phase. So this is coming out soon. We're really looking forward to it. All right, so I just want to thank you for the time. Hopefully you got some insights. What I'm really looking forward to is, just as I geek out about technology and how people are using it, is this really does push away from the idea that Bluebeam is just a markup tool, that there actually is data inside the PDF that we can hold. And now we're giving you more opportunity to manipulate that data and push it out, but also with the AI, just functionality within the software, that you don't have to write your own scripts or coding, that you can just use natural language. So really excited to see when this gets into the hands of our clients and end users, what they come back and what their feedback is on the software. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Well, now it's your turn to get involved. So just a reminder to everyone watching, please ask our speakers your questions via the chat box. Don't forget to let me know who your question is directed to. A big thank you to everyone who submitted questions while registering for the webinar today. What I might do is I'll start with some of those questions. So the first question, I might bring Rachel straight back in to the conversation. And Rachel, the questions come through from Ethan, who's watching from South Australia. And the question is, while the benefits on the back-end data side are so evident and beneficial, how do you gain buy-in from the end users with the change in approach?
Thanks, Megan. And thanks, Ethan, for a very good question. Can always trust the South Australians to bring in the excellent questions. We hear a lot about potential efficiencies and productivities and gains from this technology. But yeah, I also am really interested in the benefits for the end users and making sure that they're brought along for the journey. I would say one of the most successful ways to ensure that we've got buy-in from end users is to actually have them really involved in the design of these systems and the change. To give you an example, the CER AI tool that we built for Electronet, the very engineers who carried out that CER response work, we engaged them throughout the design and the build process. They designed exactly how the system would work, what the AI could do, what the AI should not do, where they should check and consult, and also to make sure that the human was driving the loop the entire way through the process. With that buy-in and that ability to design the process from start to finish, we then very much had their support, their encouragement, and their excitement to apply the tool to their business. Probably another way to go about this is just to make sure you're picking the right problems to solve. The sorts of things I think that most end users can get on board with pretty easily is where AI is reducing administrative burden, making people's lives easier, and also allowing them to focus on more interesting tasks, things where their specialist knowledge is being put to good use. The other thing I'd probably recommend is, most organizations do have change management and engagement teams. Where possible, make sure that you're working with them as well. They've got good skills in this area and can bring their expertise.
Awesome. Great answer. Thanks, Rachel. Leander, we had a question which came in from Francisca, who's watching in from New South Wales. And the question was, which processes do you think benefit the most from AI?
Thanks, Megan. Great question. So I think if we look at processes that will be improved, I think it's anything that's manual. Some of the examples that I gave and Shan showed some actual live demonstrations is if we look at drawings alone, there's probably a lot of engineers and people who work on projects that manually check these drawings for any errors. That will be completely automated. So those processes can, like Rachel said, be completely eradicated, and then people can move on to spending their time doing things that are of more value to the business and the project. I think the other thing is if we look at like initial processes from design phases, there'll be a lot of generative design that will come in from AI. And I think also the last thing I'll just touch on is just compliance. So AI will really look at contracts and reading things and be able to come up with outcomes and look at that entire security and compliance process and say, we can automate it. So I think the opportunities are endless.
Well, Leander, just continuing on the actual next question that we had from registration was from Brett. And his question, and it always comes up, it was around, do you see AI reducing the number of engineers required in the next 10 years? And maybe a few on the panel may want to add to this one.
Definitely. I think it's a very, very common question. I think we're actually going to see the opposite, to be fair. We're in a labour shortage at the moment, and engineers are actually in shortage. So the truth is AI is just going to help projects become more efficient. And the key word that I'd say is people become more productive. So the goal is, while organizations will be looking at specialist skills around engineering, I don't think they're going to be reducing the amount of engineers. It's just going to be, how do we become more efficient on projects with the same amount of people that we already have? And how do those people learn the skills to help either reduce rework or increase profitability? So I think it'd be quite the opposite. But if anyone else wants to chime in, that'd be good.
I probably just agree with that. And also say, we know, looking around Australia, that construction projects are moving quite. We're dealing with a housing shortage crisis. If you look at some of the massive engineering problems that Australia is grappling with, and then imagine applying double the engineers or triple engineers, that's the sort of opportunity is offering here when used securely.
Thank you both. I think you answered that really well. Shan, just a very specific question about Bluebeam, and a few of those have come through, so I might throw this one to you. Our viewer is interested to know if you have Bluebeam to do an AI-generated quantities takeoff, and how accurate would that be?
So the exciting thing, I think, with what we're doing with AI at the moment is it's still evolving. I won't talk too much of it, but it's an internal conversation about that next evolution of installation, Review 21.10, and it's got more features that are going to be really quite powerful, but I'll wait till that comes out. I don't want to be in trouble. So to answer your question, currently I haven't actually seen it happen. I'm still seeing elements where you're going to be doing the measurements, and from the measurements you can then use AI to say, grab this information. What I see is quite powerful is the complex tasks, or the if statements, or the conditions don't have to be done within Bluebeam, which can be a bit challenging. In the past, we might have had to export this out to Excel and use maybe a Power Query to run through the information and pull down all the quantity takeoff of that. We can now put, with particular prompts and more powerful prompts, we can answer that within Bluebeam. So, and its current state, I'm going to say the way I see it, and I kind of feel that within the next 3 to 6 months, it's going to be a different answer again. You'll be doing your measurements like you kind of had, but then we add the AI to quantitate, is that the right word? The measurements for you.
Thank you. Shan, I might keep the focus with you for the moment. We had a question which came through from Shane, and his question was, how can we use AI Bluebeam to help show or document scope shift during concept and detailed design?
So to answer your question, I would say that essentially what Bluebeam we're doing at this point of time is we're not here to replace people, like just throw something at it and go, like a generative design, you work it out what the problem is. We are taking away, as Leander said, those manual tasks. So I want to give you the more of a technical answer, which be, I can still see the opportunity for using the AI overlay to see the differences between two drawings. We are looking at, there's opportunities with a new acquisition with Firma. So I showed you that it will highlight the differences between two drawings. So that might help you with scope creep. But then the other thing too is, if you've done like a full takeoff, and with that takeoff, there's all the metadata behind it, like, well, when you did the takeoff, and then when you change the takeoff, well, I haven't done it, but I see the opportunity that it's just data. We could put the correct prompt in there to say, well, this is the information from first revision, this is the information from second revision. I want you to find the differences and then give me a report on the scope creep. I think that's definitely doable. I don't think that's too much of a stretch, but I would love to play with that first to be 100% confident, but I'm 95% sure.
Thanks, Shan. Rachel, we had a question come through from our live audience. So big hello to Richard, who's watching live. And he's asked, how far do you feel that building certifiers will have the ability to use an AI drone to scan a newly laid reinforcing and plumbing and compare against engineering drawings? I hope I've asked that question appropriately.
Yeah, Megan, that's a really good question, and a really interesting application of AI, I think. I haven't seen that specifically, but a few things I have seen in a similar space. I have seen the application of AI to scan drawings and designs and assess them against numerous standards and building codes, and then give feedback to the designer as to where they have and haven't followed the building codes and standards in their design. I've also seen it assess images from building sites and then use asset management records, information, historical information, and rubrics to classify that photograph and the image within the photograph, and give recommendations about its maintenance requirements. So I've seen that pulled off to a very high degree of accuracy. So I think the short answer is absolutely. I've seen related applications. It seems really possible to me, and it's probably likely already happening or being piloted out there already, because it's a fantastic use case for this kind of technology. I would probably say there would always want to be, again, humans driving the loop here, where we'd want to make sure the right approvals were being gained for the use of the drones, the checks and balances on how they were used, checking that the AI is referencing the right designs, and then also final checking the observations and findings. But even allowing for those kind of human touch points, I think there's a really tremendous possibility here for time and quality gains on projects through that application. So yeah, great thinking.
Thanks for that. And I think, in your answer then, you have touched on a couple of the other live questions which came through, which were really around, I suppose, the role of humans with AI. So, is there a worry about AI replacing expertise? So that definitely, I think, you've got a few of the live questions that have come through with that answer. So thanks for that Rachel. Leander, going back to, there was a question that I wanted to direct to yourself. And again, on this kind of topic, and it came in from Fabian around, how do you assess the IP leak risk in your project for the use of AI by your engineers?
Yeah, that's a great question, Megan. I think when it comes to IP, a lot of the AI providers are looking at this already. They call it ethical AI. And it's all around how do we ensure that the AI reads our information but does not be trained on our information, so that when they release newer models, those new models are not trained on confidential information. So a lot of AI providers, for one, are limiting the amount of training that are given by customers' documentation. That's one thing. The second thing is when we look at large scale organizations like enterprises, they will still use the IP of themselves by implementing things like RAG. So if anyone doesn't know what RAG is, it's retrieval augmented generation. So you'll have the AI, like OpenAI Copilot, which has expertise and knowledge, but does not specifically have knowledge about your business. And then you can have a RAG system, call it like a SharePoint, where it has all of your documentation, so specific standards of your business or confidential information that you feed to the AI. You limit the amount of training that it's going to have, and then organizations can ask questions to the AI about their specific business and their specific business practices. So there are ways to look at that. When it comes to actual IP and the outcome of that, that's a big question that we're looking at the moment. I think there's going to be a lot of movement in that space, and things like copyright. I think, for example, copyright lawyers around AI are probably going to be one of the most well-funded jobs in the future. But as for how do we manage IP, it's containerizing that into different systems like RAG.
Awesome, thank you. Now, Shan, I've got some more very specific questions for you with regards to Bluebeam. Rob has sent through a question. Can AI be applied to Studio Bluebeam sets to automate the process of uploading docs?
I'm not sure, to be honest, at this point in time. So what I will say to you that we haven't mapped out every single function within Bluebeam that's possible. We've released Max with a range, I don't know the percentage of functions that AI can get access. So there's that mapping process in between. I haven't actually tried it with sets. We're always testing out internally and doing our successes, or where we can actually use the software and how it automates tasks. I think we did the other day for tags, I think it was, or some other information, bookmarks, I think it was, and that was quite quick. So I'm sorry, I don't actually have an answer on sets. It's kind of exciting and then frustrating. That exciting that there's new software I get to play with and try this, let's try this, let's try this. But it's also at the same time, I haven't tried that yet, and then we might find that that's not available. Oh, hold on, in the updated version we are coming out, because every month there's an updated opportunity. Quarter there's an update. We might see some new features inside that.
Awesome, thank you. And then continuing on, I've got another question for you with regards to, can AI create bill of materials for steel structures? So measurements, steel specs, etc.
So I was having a conversation the other day with another CSM, and they said they've got a bill of materials out of it. I'm not quite too sure yet, so I'm trying to get my head around how did they let the AI know, or with the information that functions within Bluebeam, understand that this is a length of beam and this is the size, and extract that. So I'm not confident in doing that myself. Apparently it's happened. I will say that I'm very confident that from the steel, if you are, you would have to be at the moment, you take a measurement, you say this is your 310 UB32, turns out I got 16 of these is its lengths. We can definitely use the MCP now, or Claude in this case, to automate the tasks of the tricky things, like you buy steel in certain lengths. You don't just buy it in 5.7 meters and there's no offcut. You've got to allow for offcut when you do your pricing. So those if statements, I would call them, and the more complex tasks, we can now put that into the prompt. So that should mean when you're quoting your jobs, can you quote an extra 1, 2, or 3 more jobs in a week, depending on the size, of course. But point being, we can make that much more powerful. We give you access to effectively a coding way to interrogate the PDFs.
Awesome, thank you. Rachel, we had a live question come through from Michael. Michael's question was, Rachel, how do you work with management who don't understand the change and investment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One thing I'm finding is there's a massive variance in terms of management, in terms of co-workers, in terms of clients that I talk with about kind of how they understand this technology and kind of how ready they are to embrace it. Look, the first thing I would say is just understand better if there are concerns, what they are, listen and ask questions. It's always good to understand where people are coming from and why. One of the first things I always emphasize and go back to is the security and safety. And, as I spoke to, that was the foundation of all the work that Aurecon have done in this space. The governance, the responsible use of AI, and also, our secure and private endpoint, and making sure that we had our security and privacy absolutely locked down before we started experimenting. Probably another really good way to have this conversation with people in management who don't quite understand, the benefit or what's possible, is to use use cases and give examples. I think it's a lot easier for people to grasp what other people are doing and how they've applied the technology and got benefit from it than, theoretical use cases or what you think might be possible. So the more practical, the more applied, and, the more you can talk about what other people are doing, that then brings out everyone's competitive side and they think, well, let's do that too. And examples as well. I think the last point I'd go to is people, we're a consulting firm at Aurecon, and our clients and customers are central to every decision we make and what we're doing. So if I felt like one manager wasn't potentially understanding the benefit, I'd perhaps talk about what their clients are saying, and how they're talking about their intentions for this technology, and making sure that we're understanding that and aligning to it.
Exactly. Thank you. Thanks for that. Leander, I'll bring you back in. I have a question. I think this is a really good question. We've got a range of engineers watching today. And this one came through from Nicholas from Victoria. So his question was, for someone early in their career, what AI skills or tools would you consider to be the most important to learn for the future engineering landscape? And then the next part of the question, what current skills and tools do you believe are going to become irrelevant, if I can get my words out?
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, I think I get asked this question a lot from my friends who are just trying to start off in AI. I think the biggest thing, and it's probably the most underrated, is having the ability to talk to AI in their own language. And what I mean by that is right now people go to ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, and just say things like, build me this, create this for me. You're going to get a simple answer from the AI using that. But if you actually look at a term called prompt engineering, which is where you advance your skills in the way that you communicate with AI, it will put you ahead. And I'll give you an example of this. Instead of telling the AI to just deliver a task for you, you can change it and say, you AI are in the top 0.1% engineering skill in the world. You work for XYZ company. This is the task I'm giving you, and I want this outcome. By using that kind of framework and language, the AI will give you a better result. So that's one thing I'd definitely be looking at. The second thing is I would highly recommend people to start doing research just from YouTube around their own specific industry. So for us in construction engineering, there's a few little newsletters and articles and information on AI that gets released from different providers. I'm sure we can send some of that information. And lastly, I think when it comes to relevant skills on I think it's all going to be about how do you solve problems in your own business. Rachel kind of touched on it. AI has a million different use cases, and there's probably a million different ways you can interact with it. But the truth is, if it doesn't solve a problem, it's just a feature. And when organizations and vendors like Bluebeam build their features, they look at the problems they can solve. So if I was getting into AI now, I would be looking back and saying, what are some of the things that I do on a daily basis that take me time that could be automated using AI? And what are the things that I can do in my own organization from a day-to-day perspective that can bring more value to my business? I think that's probably the right way to think about it.
Awesome. Great answer. Leander, I'll jump into the next question with yourself. I might have both you and Rachel, if you could answer this one. It came through from Canal from Canberra. And the question was around, in what ways can AI benefit complex major projects?
Definitely. So I think it's kind of similar to my answer in the last question, but there is going to be a multitude of different ways AI can help our construction projects from end to end. So I'll give you one example. There is, and it could kind of touch on the question that was asked to Rachel earlier about building certification, but it's more around safety. So there's a term in AI called computer vision. So in the past, you would have all interacted with drawings and you would upload those drawings and the AI reads drawing names, numbers, things like that. We call that OCR. But that technology has evolved now through AI. And effectively, it's called computer vision, which gives AI eyes. And you can train computer vision to show things that are compliant and non-compliant. So in the future, when we look at some large risks in our business or our industry, which is safety of people on projects, which is a really, really big thing, computers can be fed into video feeds and then they can watch construction sites and say, here is a potential risk because XYZ worker is not wearing the correct boots, or are they in a restricted area that they shouldn't be in? Computer vision can view that and then automatically flag it to the right and appropriate people. So there are different ways we can help in major projects. That's just one example. I mean, obviously, Shanik's given some examples from the documentation perspective, but I think it's also just going back to the point where if you look at your business, your use case, your role, and then funneling it back from there, often a quick Google or kind of investigation will lead you to that path of where AI can help fix it. Rachel, I'll pass you.
Yeah, great answer. And I'd probably just add, I mean, again, this is a really good question because I think one of the most interesting applications of AI is to complex problems. And obviously, then complex major projects carry an awful lot of them. So there's a lot of different applications. Look, even just out of the box, you could have the ability to sense make large amounts of related historical information, bid information, and related previous projects. Technical documentation and standards around the very specific engineering challenges that this particular project type is going to have. Already out of the box, there's the ability for AI to just do that. But that said, to lift up from solutions to kind of holistic approaches, I think the best benefits can come from a very tailored digital and engineering AI plan. So at the beginning of the project or as early as possible, workshopping with engineers, domain experts, and AI experts to pick out across this project, what are the most suitable problems that we could apply this kind of technology to? and then, shortlisting them, prototyping them, and moving them through to solutions. So just taking a kind of planned approach from the beginnings to say, what's our sort of AI philosophy and approach to this project going to be? And I guess the very best advice I could give is just to start thinking about data, digital, and AI strategy on major projects as early as possible.
Rachel, just we had a question come through live, and it was from Marla, and the question was, how do we balance using AI to do design checks, but also how to teach less experienced engineers to know when the AI has made a mistake? Because I know you pointed out in your presentation, like, what was it, Dactard and things like that, like just these made up things. But how do you teach the younger engineers that, hang on, there is an issue there?
This is a really interesting question. And if I could design a perfect world, my answer would be that I would love for all engineering courses in universities at this point to be having a critical use of AI and critical analysis of AI outputs topic. I think this is just going to be embedded in the way that every engineer works, and so the ability to assess it critically and understand its strengths and weaknesses is going to be really important. I feel like as managers, we really need to start thinking about the kind of tasks that we give engineers and the kind of path that we put them through in the first kind of years of their sort of postgraduate experience, and start thinking about how these tools fit into that and adapting the kind of onboarding and uplift plan that we have for young engineers to allow for the fact that this technology is going to be used, and how do we firstly make sure that there's still meaningful learning activities that they can undertake, and secondly make sure that, for those of us who have done things the old-fashioned ways for much of our career, we'll probably look at things a little bit more skeptically, but for people who are coming out of university already using these tools, they might have a different mindset. So yeah, I don't know if there's another role that's going to emerge, which will be for specialists in kind of, early career advice in this kind of technology. It's going to be a really interesting space to watch.
Definitely. Well, look, I think we're coming to the end of our Q&A for today, but what I would like to pose to each of you on the panel, and apologies, I haven't given you any heads up on this one. If you'd like to, I suppose, final comments or key takeaways that you would like to leave with the audience. So I might start how I see you. Leander, did you want to kick off first?
Definitely, yeah. Thanks, Megan. So I think for me, it's all about don't be afraid of AI. I think become quite curious. And my biggest, I'd say, recommendation to anyone that's getting into AI right now is just test, learn. We're in a phase where a lot of the applications are still free to use and test. For example, Claude, OpenAI, you can still interact with it. And then the second thing is, when you're looking to implement AI into your business, I can't reiterate it enough. If you want a proof of concept to work, start small. Have a look at the problem that you're trying to solve and engage all of the people in your business in the right way. But I'd say be very curious, because I think it's going to really help a lot of our jobs in the future.
Good answer. Rachel?
I'd start by giving a shout out to Leander and Shanok that there's obviously some really great things coming through in the Bluebeam space. It was pretty exciting to hear about them today. So thanks for the share there. I'd probably just echo Leander's points. Being curious and being hands-on, there's absolutely no substitute for seeing and experimenting with this kind of technology and seeing what it does well, seeing where the Dactards emerge, and finding out where it can save you time, but also where you need to apply critical thinking to using it. Join conversations, continue to attend sort of webinars and activities like this to find out more. Talk to your colleagues, talk to people you're working with on projects, and yeah, just continue to embrace it. But also keep in mind the mindset of, are we doing this securely? Are we doing this safely? And asking the questions around the tools that you're using to make sure that that is underscoring them.
Awesome. And Shan, final message.
Right. So I'll lean into the many years of training I've done, and not just Bluebeam but other software. But essentially, with everyone, have a think about how you're currently using the software, and I'll lean into Bluebeam here. So we see a whole I used to say 3 different stages, but now I'm going to call it 4 stages. So one is a paper replacement, where that's fantastic. You've got Bluebeam, and you're doing it better than you did with paper. And then we're looking at digitizing that process and using some of the functions within Bluebeam. This could be potentially step 2. In step 3, you're thinking about the data within Bluebeam and what that really means within the markup list. And look, I've got to say, a lot of our clients aren't really capitalizing off that information. So now when we go to the next level of AI, like step 4, AI wants data. So then you've got an opportunity to gather all that information within AI and exploit that. So from a Bluebeam journey, so start to think about the data that you're embedding into this. Every time you do a markup of any sort, that's information, and how can you utilize that? So just think about the process and how you can improve it to make yourself more efficient.
Well, that's all the time that we have for today. A big thank you to our panel. So please join me in thanking Rachel Hicks, Leander Starr and Shanna Halliday for their time and input and their wonderful final messages. I would also like to thank Engineers Australia's industry partner, Bluebeam, for their support today. And then my normal request of the audience, if you could please complete the short feedback form, which is linked in the description box below. As you all know, by completing that, it really does help us to improve and plan our future sessions for you. So finally, a big thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you at our next Industry Partners event. Good afternoon.